So this morning I have a privilege. I want to encourage you actually. So we're going to go through the Bible through different stories. If you know me, you know I love stories. I love storytelling. So we will try to do that this morning. Because I know a lot of you in this house have a dream shut up inside you. And you know that God has spoken things to you, but sometimes it's very scary to step out and actually bring it to pass. Because those dreams are usually bigger than we are. So we're going to go and look at some scriptures and see what God says about it and how He's planning on bringing it to pass. Because in the end, it is His dream. So in this world, we know that if we want to obtain a good, we need to go and use the currency we have, which is the money. But I can have all the money in my wallet. Until I pull it out of my wallet and pay for that good, it cannot be mine. So heaven operates on a very, very similar principle. There is a currency of heaven, and that is faith. But you can have all the faith. If you do not step out in obedience, it just stays in your wallet. So faith and obedience go together. And we know that even everything that we are, we believe in an invisible God. But we have this faith, we have this currency, and that is at very, very core of our being. And we know Jesus says that God says without faith is impossible to please God, and even talks about if you have a faith size of a mustard seed and you say to this mountain, be moved. And I think He really actually meant like the substance of it just detonates things in front of us. There is nothing that is too high that can stand in your way if you have even that tiny little bit of faith. And we also know that as Jesus went and healed the people, a lot of times He would say, your faith has healed you. Be unto you according to your faith. So it's like this weighty, weighty substance that we have. But God is the author of the faith within us and our heart. And He is the one that calls to us. And like an invisible thread, He keeps tugging on our faith that is deposited within us. So it doesn't matter if it's the size of a mustard seed, actually it's good. Size of a mustard seed, because as we know, Bible says the mustard seed grows to be a very strong tree that birds can perch on it. Jeremiah 29:11. We're gonna have a little verse displayed on the screen. And here we go. So it says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and you will find me when you seek me with all of your heart. He did not say, I think, or He did not whisper. He declared it. You know, when people make declarations, they make them boldly. They make the statements, their voice goes up. There's like the posture that goes forward. He declares that He has plans over our lives. Not just somebody's life, not just Moses' life or David's life, but every single one of us can put our name in that. And that is one of those things we can take to bank. He declares it over us. He knows the purposes He has over our lives. And that is a really, really important thing. When Gideon was hiding in a wine press, so wine press is for wine, but he's hiding in a wine press and he's threshing wheat because he was scared of Midianites who were pounding the Israelites for a while, because Israelites kind of turned away from the Lord, and they even built the altars to Baal and worshipped other gods and stuff. But at the same time, they were crying out to Jehovah God and were kind of disappointed at how come He's not showing up. So Gideon is just a young man. He's hiding in a wine press, and the angel of the Lord comes to him. And the first words that he uses is, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. And you have to think about that. This is how it is. I mean, it must have been something for the angel of the Lord to come to you. But was the angel joking? Was he being sarcastic? Was he just wanting to tease Gideon? Or did he know something about him before it even came to pass? See, the Lord knows us before we become that thing, the person that He has in mind. And Gideon is astounded, and he even says, my clan is the smallest and I'm the weakest of them all. But that didn't matter because God had a plan and purpose he needed Gideon to move into so that God's purposes can be accomplished. What about David? Little King David, before he was the king, when Samuel came to anoint everybody, all the other brothers, they met the standard. They looked strong, they looked amazing, they were probably more mature. And David was just a little shepherd boy in a field with the sheep. And his father even calls him the worthless one. But there is the day when David goes down and he goes where the grown men ready for battle would go and put on their armor. They would suit up every day. And for 40 days they would go out. And then they would be frozen with fear, could not face Goliath. But David picked up something on behalf of God. And he steps into that role and takes his little 5 stones. And he slings it, and Goliath goes down. God met him in that moment. So I know a lot of you know the story of Esther, but there's always 1 or 2 that have not quite heard it. So please go with me like you have never heard it before. We're going to park here for a while because it is one of the most amazing stories to me. And we know Esther by always taking the hold of the king's scepter and being granted favor. But there is so much more to that story. So Esther was just a child when she lost both of her parents. And I can only imagine, because I haven't gone through it, I cannot say I know how it was. I can only imagine how hard that would be. It's terrible to lose 1 parent, never mind 2. So she must have felt absolutely lost, hurt, lonely, abandoned. But then her uncle Mordecai comes and he adopts her and she becomes like a daughter to him. The years go by and she grows up into a beautiful young woman. And then it wasn't enough what she went through. There comes the king's man and they take her to the palace to become one of the beautiful ladies, concubines, in hopes of king maybe picking her for the future wife. So it's just a very, very sad story. And one of the amazing things about the book of Esther is that throughout the whole book, God is never mentioned once, but his hand is so visibly felt throughout the whole book. I just absolutely love that. He doesn't have to come in with a trumpet, but you see him and you recognize him and you feel him. So the whole book revolves around 5 different people, as we know. Queen Vashti, the king, Esther, Mordecai, Haman. So Mordecai is the godly Jew and Haman is a very wealthy but corrupt officer. And at the beginning of the book, we have this beauty of the empire the king had, and it's displayed and it talks about how many provinces he owns, and he puts on a banquet. I cannot even imagine. It lasted 180 days. That's some banquet. That is like a lot of money to do something like that. So he puts it on for all the royal officials and everybody else, and then at the end of it, he puts on another banquet, like that wasn't enough. And it says everybody from great and small was invited to that one. And at the banquet, the wine is freely flowing, and he had too much. And so he's asking for Vashti, the queen, to come and present herself because she was very beautiful. And Vashti refuses. So the king is offended, and he counsels with some of his wise men and other royals, and they say, oh, we cannot have that. If the other women in the kingdom hear that queen has refused to come before you, they will become disobedient, and we will have a whole manhood in trouble. We wouldn't want to go that way. So anyway, so they come up with a decree that Vashti can never come into the presence of the king, but he needs to send his army out to find a whole bunch of other young women so they can be brought to him and he can pick one that is going to replace Queen Vashti. So then we have the Mordecai, who was taken into the captivity when he was, at some point when he was younger, and he's in Susa, where the palace is, and he sits at the king's gate with all the other people that sit at the king's gate. It's like the entrance. It's a very prominent place. And the decree was given that everybody needs to bow down to Haman, and probably the others, but Haman, because his status was going up. Like, he was becoming quite wealthy and quite up there in his position. But Mordecai refuses to bow down to him. He just absolutely will not. And Haman starts hating Mordecai, but his hate doesn't just stop at one man. It just goes across the board, and he just starts hating all the Jews. And anyway, so he cannot stand that the Mordecai will not bow down to him. But while Mordecai is at the gate one day, 2 of the officers start plotting against the king. And I just like, honestly, this is like, Bible's the best. Like, you want to watch a good movie? This is like so good, so complicated, the plot thickens. And so Mordecai is at the gate, and he hears these 2 eunuchs, 2 guys that are with him serving at the gate. They're plotting to kill the king. So he knows the plan, so he makes a decision, goes and tells Esther. And Esther in return runs and tells the king. And so everything is investigated, and the men are found guilty, and they are hung on gallows. And I looked it up. I always thought like hung on gallows means like you get hung, like, by your neck. But actually a lot of it talks about stakes being put in ground and then people being impaled on stakes, like just a horrible way of dying. So anyway, so now the king has his scribes, and they write it in the Chronicles. On such and such day, Mordecai reported, and it was all put in there. And the Chronicles were put away. So this is where we're going to put this little tidbit of an information aside, and we're going to move on with the story. So Haman is planning to kill the Jews, and Mordecai again gets the wind of the plan, and he makes the crucial decision to tell Esther. So when he tells Esther, she says, sorry, uncle, I cannot do anything, because nobody gets to just go in before the king. Their life will cease at that moment. You cannot just go into him. And then in Esther 4:13 and 14, if we can have that displayed, Mordecai does another try. So he says very, very pointedly, do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows, but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Famous sentence. So Mordecai had no doubt that God would raise up somebody from some other place if this one would not open up and save his people. So Esther then probably went through some time of prayer, rethinking, and she comes back with an answer of saying, okay, gather all the people, tell them to fast and pray for me. I will do the same, and in 3 days, I will go before the king. And if I die, I die. She decided to just go forth with it. And Jewish people even today celebrate the day and time when they were saved from extermination. So she goes in, and the king extends the scepter. We know the whole thing. We all like to be called Esthers and have the favor, and the king, extending the scepter and stuff. And she starts planning a banquet. So she plans one banquet, and she's very wise. She's going really slow about this, which is super surprising. But anyway, she's a wise woman. So she plans a banquet and only invites the king and Haman. So Haman starts feeling really, really important. And he comes to the banquet, and the banquet is wonderful, and everything is going well. And off he is going to go home. And Esther said, oh, one more thing. How about we have another banquet tomorrow? Because king is wanting to say, what do you want from me, Esther? And she's being very mysterious suddenly. And so she says, tomorrow at the banquet, I shall tell you. So Haman at this time is feeling really, really puffed up. Can you imagine? Queen wants just him and the king in the presence. He must be like becoming a really, really important person. So he is going home. He's going to tell his wife how wonderful this whole thing was. But on the way home, there's Mordecai standing at the gate again. and he will not bow down to Haman. So Haman's anger starts growing so hot that even the beauty of the banquets that he was at and the favor of the king and the queen is overshadowed by his hate for Mordecai and all the Jews. So when he goes home, his wife says to him, well, why don't you build a really tall gallows and you hang Haman on it? And he thinks it's a really wonderful plan. So he heads off and he gets his little gang, and they're building these really tall poles, I guess, to hang Mordecai on it. But in the meantime, in the palace, the king cannot sleep. So Mordecai is building his gallows outside, and king's battling insomnia. And he wakes up, and I don't know, maybe that was how they did it in the old time before TV, phones, and everything else they had. But he says, bring me the Chronicles. Let's read and see what is in them. So they bring the Chronicles, and they start reading. And there is a portion where it says, Mordecai the Jew reported a plot of these two people that tried to kill the king. And it was investigated and they were done away with. So the king says, what was done for Mordecai to reward him? And they said, nothing was done for him. And now king is thinking, okay, well, that's not right. We have to remedy the situation. So he's fully awake. So it's probably the morning hours, because this insomnia went on for a while, the reading of the books and stuff. So it's probably early morning, and there's not too many people stirring in a court. But he says to his servants, go and look who's in a king's court. They opened the windows or whatever they did, and lo and behold, there's Haman. He's just coming back from building the gallows, and he wants attendance with the king so that he can further his plot to kill Mordecai. And king says, bring him in. Do you see the invisible hand of God? Like, it is amazing. And so he comes in and he says to him, what do you think it should be done for the man that king wishes to honor? And Haman is thinking, oh, my status is growing. Who else could be, king talking about than myself? Well, so he's just, getting really, really excited. He's probably like rubbing his hands on the inside in his mind, going like, yes, this is really, really good. And then he says, well, king, you should bring out the robe that you wore and put it on that man, and you should then get a horse that you were riding, and you can put that man on him, and then pick one of your princes, one of your nobles, and have him lead that man on a horse with the robe and everything, and have him declare before all the people, this is what the king does to a man that he wishes to honor. And king says, marvelous. Why don't you go and do all of that for Jew, the Mordecai? And I cannot even imagine what goes on inside Haman's mind, because in that moment, one of the most powerful men in the land gets shut up. His hands get tied, because when God sets plan in motion, nothing can stop it. Amen. So you know the rest of the story, the banquet and stuff, and in the end, pretty much, Haman gets hung on those gallows that he prepared for Mordecai. So Esther had a huge role to play in saving her people, but God took care of everything completely. It would be a wonderful thing if a book of Esther was just about a little orphan girl becoming a queen. But it was about so much more. It was about his plans and purposes, and Esther being set into the position where he wanted her to be. And now I just want to say to all of you, because I know a lot of you are waiting, you have these plans and purposes that you feel the Lord wants you to step into, but it is scary. Because there are always forces that are trying to suspend the dream that God has put within you. But don't compromise your dream. Let him move you into the position to unlock those plans and purposes. I mean, we have the same example with Joseph. He was thrown in a pit, and then he was sold into slavery, and he was put in a prison, and then he was put in a prison, and then, everything. But all of that, God saw him saving his nation from famine, So God is in it, even in those low moments when we cannot see him, like we cannot feel him. But he knows the destiny and plans that he has for us. And this is not about standing in a stadium, going to the missions field. Whatever he has planted in you, and he is so unique that as many as types of us there is as people, there is that many plans that he puts within your heart. Because not everybody is loud and flamboyant and, whatever it is. But, I thought about 12 disciples. We know about Peter. We know about Mark. We know about Luke. We know about Thomas, even for his doubting and stuff. We know about Judas. But Thaddeus, that guy gets lost. But he was one of the 12. Jesus came and he called him and he left everything and he followed and he sat at his feet. And he was taught, and he went out, and he healed the sick, and he cast the devils out of people, and maybe he rose the dead, and he was there all the way through the journey. But we don't, just because not everybody is meant to be loud, but you are meant to do what God has given you to do. When Paul was on a ship and he was going be taken to the trial, he was on the ship and they were sailing, and in the beginning it was fair weather, it was beautiful, and then the horrible storm picked up and the winds were like really, really harsh, and the sea can be really angry. And on the 14th day it says, and for I don't know how many days the men have not eaten much because they were really, really concerned about their lives. And on the 14th day, the storm was raging really, really badly, and they were really in fear, and the angel of the Lord shows up, and he speaks to Paul, and he pretty much says, the ship will be lost, but everybody on it will be saved. But one of the keys was everybody had to stay on the ship. And he speaks to them, and the part in there that my eye caught was it says, it will be so because you will stand the trial. So there was the plans and purposes for Paul, and because of that, all of these other men will be saved, but the key was stay on the ship. So they were instructed to lower the anchors at the back, so they went and lowered the anchors at the back. Then the sailors went and lowered they were going to lower the anchors at the front. But as they went, they were just pretending. They were actually lowering the boats. And when Paul saw that, he instructed the soldiers to say, quickly go, cut the ropes. So they cut the ropes. See, they were trying to have the plan B. And as long as, because sometimes we get scared because God's plans and purposes can be so big, you think, how am I going to step into that? Do you see me? I feel so small and so unable, but it was never about us. It's a partnership with him. And so anyway, so there is no plan B, because as long as we have the plan B, we will not move into that position. Years ago, we went to Winthrop, Washington, as a retreat. Eli and Marty were with us, and we had this quite a windy road. That's all I remember. I wasn't really too excited about that. But it was a leadership retreat. We went. It was wonderful. And at some point, what time do I have here? Oh, Pastor Ken, I might finish earlier. You're going to have to jump in and cover here. At one point, we went and we had beautiful meals. We would have a community meals, and we would, as ladies, cook it all up, and then we would have times of the fellowship, and boy, I rushed through that so fast. And we absolutely loved it, and it was a beautiful place. But we found out on a coffee table there was a book, and in that book, a couple years prior, there was a terrible fire. They called it a 30-mile fire, and it was so bad. It was probably, I think they said they had the driest conditions weather-wise for a very long time, no rain, and then the temperatures were in mid-30s. And because of all of these perfect conditions that came together, the fire from the unattended campfire sparked this big fire thing that was going on, and it grew so much that it actually started to carry its own weather within. And from reading, and 4 people lost their lives, I believe, and from reading about it, it's like the intensity and the swirling, and like there's like winds that pick up within and stuff, and there's an updraft that goes, up, and just it can create condensation on the ash and actually create clouds that rain, and they can help with putting out the fires, but also it can go into a wind. And I think now, as the time kind of went on, and we see these wildfires up north, and they just eat up the whole towns and stuff, and even the fire in LA. We've just seen how fierce it can be, how when all these elements get, together in a perfect cohesion, how all of that sparks one another and creates this horrible, horrible engulfing fire. But I honestly believe in the Spirit. It's something like that needs to happen with us, because God's plans and purposes over each and every one of us need to go forth. And we cannot let the fear, we cannot let the unknown take hold of us, because in all of it, like He is there. Like when we were singing the songs today, when they were marching around the Jericho, it wasn't their singing that brought the walls down. It was their praise and their heart towards God, but it wasn't their sound. God was in it. He wanted faith and obedience. When David picked up those 5 stones, and he decided to go against the Goliath, who was, I think they said 13 feet. He probably had a pretty good head on him with a thick skull. And he slings his little 5 stones, but God meets him in that moment, because it was about God's plans and purposes, and sinks it into his brain, and down goes Goliath. Like there were all these different things that as we believe, and as we step into it, the Lord takes over, and it's a partnership that goes both ways. But He's the one that does it, and we are the one. He doesn't need us. Like He honestly does not need us as people, as humans. He can do it all Himself. But He wants our partnership. He wants us. He wants you. He wants me to join in, because there is something precious in it. I mean, in the end, He created us after His own image. I think He really puts a lot of love and trust and extended hand to us to say, yes, you can. Yes, you can. So we have a little graphic. It's really, really cute. There it goes. So when plans of God for us meet with a seed of faith and obedience in a perfect timing, we fulfill the destiny that He has for us. It's like this perfect ignition that happens, but it's needed. He's always there. He's always waiting. There is such a thing as a timing of God. When in His mercy, what He does, He's like the mother eagle. When we get unsure and we're not, a little scared, and how do we step out? The Bible says the mother eagle stirs her nest. I didn't know what stirring her nest meant. She went in there and fluffed up the things and made it comfortable. Actually, what it means, she decides it's time for those little ones to start flying. So she goes and she removes all the feathers, all the soft bits out of there, and leaves the sharp sticks. And now it becomes a little bit uncomfortable to lie in that nest. And then the Bible says that God hovers over His people. So Mother Eagle hovers over her nest. So I thought, what does that mean? Just different pictures in my head, and then you go and look it up, and it's like, oh. So she goes into the nest, and she opens her wings, and she provides protection for those babies. But she doesn't feed them anymore. So they're sitting on the sharp sticks, safely under her wings, with empty bellies. And then, if they don't want to go and try to leap into the air, she flies in front with a fresh kill and goes by to say, look at this tasty food. You can find it for yourself somewhere down below. But she doesn't give it. And then she'll nudge them out, give them a gentle push until they fly out of that nest. And then she'll gently swoop underneath them and pick them up on her back, on her wings, and take them back to the nest, and again until they learn to fly. And I think the Lord is gracious and compassionate, patient and loving, that he does actually stuff just like that for us. Because those babies, they don't just hatch out of the egg and the mother pushes them out because she knows they will crash and die. But all the things in your life that you have gone through, they are not to be wasted. They're the collections of the things that the Lord has put within you. And he didn't say, I have a plan for you, declares the Lord. He says, for I know the plans that I have for you. Not one, but over and over and over again. And if you fail, he'll pick you up on his wings and he'll give you another chance because he is that loving.